Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tarot Today. I am Delphine Delamar, and I'm here with.
Adrien, hi Delphine, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm great. I'm great. The weekend's coming up. Well, actually, this is the weekend. This will be released on Wednesday, but I'm excited. It's sunny, so I can't really complain.
Yeah, honestly, same here. No complaints. It's going to be a hot day. But Adrian and I were thinking today that we should talk to you guys about spreads because, of course, we've been talking about the cards, we've been talking about court cards, minors, majors, whatever. But now it would probably be helpful to talk about spreads. And so, a spread, for those of you that don't know, is the layout in which we lay out the cards and then interpret them. Um, so basically, the way that I always explain it is the spread is the frame, and then the cards are the portrait.
Yeah, I like that. The frame and the portrait.
Yeah, because it's
Wow.
like, yeah, I think it's a really helpful way to understand. And classic spreads, we have the Celtic cross, which is probably like the most traditional and the oldest. Most advanced tarot readers have their own version of the Celtic cross. Just know that it's like you will always find like a million and one different versions
Mhm.
online. Don't necessarily be afraid of that. Just take the one that resonates with you and stick with it. Like I mean, just because you see somebody else using a different Celtic cross, like I mean, that doesn't mean that you should adopt your style. Because point is that like these templates will become honestly just etched into your memory to the point where it's just like it just becomes second nature. So it's less important about which thread you pick and more important that you just know it and that you know it very well. The Celtic cross is a 10 card spread traditionally. um, I oftentimes add a lot more cards to that spread. There's also very simple spreads like past, present, future. So that's a simple three-card spread that many people are familiar with. There's a spread that I really like to use that I think is very, very good for just like simple questions, and I call it the elements and spirits. There's many variations of this online as well, but essentially what that does is it lays out the cards, four cards, and the elemental positions. So that's earth, air, fire, and water. And so basically, the earth position will tangibly or practically tell you what's happening in physical reality. The mental level, air, will tell you what somebody is thinking or like sort of like the mental energy around a specific situation. Then there's the fire position, which is the unexpected element. And basically, that's all about just like the unexpected energy coming into a spread. So I think that it's a nice position to have because it accommodates that for which we cannot see or have not asked. And then we have the water position, which is the emotional position. So that's all about feelings. And basically, if you're able to read these four different layers, it's very easy to ascertain what's going on. Another thing about spreads that I always like to mention is that when it comes to spreads, we need to be very clear with our cards about what we're doing. So we need to make sure that we have a clear question. If you don't have a clear question, you can't read tarot, okay? Or you're not going to get an answer. Clear question, or you won't get an answer. And then basically, we need to keep in mind which the position within which the card is inhabiting. So basically, what I mean by that is like, is the card showing up in the earth element, or is it showing up in the past, or is it showing up in the future, right? And then we need to keep in mind the meaning of the card itself. So basically, these three different limbs, I suppose. So we need to keep in mind the position within the spread, the question that we are actually asking, and then also the meaning of the card itself. And basically, these are the three things that will give us the answer that we're seeking, right? And if we lose any one of these elements, we're not going to arrive at the right answer, or our answer will be weakened. Um, Another thing that I like to say about spreads is you don't have to use them. I routinely do not use spreads and I just pull cards and see what comes out. How do you do this? One of the ways that I do it is if I just pull out two cards, I'll just read their combined energy. So so let's say that I pull the King of Cups, the Magician. I'm not necessarily saying, oh, King of Cups, therefore magician happens. I'm reading it as, oh, somebody is feeling, emotionally comfortable in something that they're trying to or going to create or manifest, right?
Yes.
Whereas if I was reading past present, this would be like, somebody comes into emotional awareness of something that they're wanting to do and then ends up taking action due to the magician or whatever, or creates their reality depending on, the emotions that rose up in the King of Cups. Um, I don't feel like that was the best example, but I'll pull some other cards. But I have monologued. So sorry, Adrian. I will let you take it.
Absolutely. No, no, that's good. That's good to hear. There's some slightly different techniques when we look at what I call the English tarot and the French tarot. But the way I like to talk about it is that spread with positional and non-positional spreads, right? And the way Delphine has described here, she described a number of positional spreads. The Celtic cross is a positional spread. Past, present, future is a positional spread. The element spread, which I think is beautiful because this gives you a very good understanding of where the person is standing. And sometimes, if the person doesn't have a question, it's a good way to start, right? Because you can see where the issue might be that we need to pinpoint, and then you create a question out of that.
I,
So
oh my God, I hate it when clients don't have questions.
it's tough. It's
Oh,
tough.
well, also, it's just like if you don't have a question, what are we doing here? Like, babe, go get curious and get back to me.
Yeah, I think people always have a question. The problem is that they don't know how to formulate it, or they know that they need to find something out, but they don't know, they can't put their finger on it. And so I think, um, the, right, look, if people come to us and they have a question, we're able to start work immediately, right? If they don't have a question, we're gonna have to psychically or with the cards or do a certain amount of work to get to the question itself, which will take a quarter or sometimes half of the session, right? But maybe this is what they need to discover as well. And but by using an element spread like you described, is a good way to see where the issue may be. Is it in the heart? Is it in the head? Is it in the growing? Or is it in the feet? Type of thing. In the four elements. Um, yes, Delphine. What did you want to say?
Oh, no, no, no. I just like that. I think that you're more patient with it than I am. I could learn from that because I get a little impatient with it. I'm just kind of like, okay, like, because then there's also some people that come in for a tarot reading and they're like, oh, actually, I like to just like let life happen. It's like, well, essentially, the art of tarot is about the spirit of inquiry. So it's like, you know, you need to pick something that you want to look at. Or otherwise, that's fine. I can give you a really fluffy meaning, or sorry, reading, and we can just talk about
Yeah.
we can
So
talk
that's
about
the
that, I
thing,
suppose.
the question will be. I always say the question is 50% of the reading. A
Yeah.
sharp question gives you a sharp answer, and there's no way around it. And but the way I like to teach is that sometimes I have this exercise which is oracle writing, and I get my students to write an oracle out of three cards. I've got a number of techniques to get them to do that. I get my students to write an oracle out of three cards without a question, because then they have to deliver a sort of a poetic sentence, right? And but once they're able to do this, then they can anchor this in a question, and it becomes very easy, right? So let me go back to positional and non-positional. So the positional, what's important to understand, like Delphine described, is that each position will inform how you read this card. Was the magician in the past, or is he in the present, or is he in the future? Is it in the advice? Is it in the outcome? All of these positions will inform how you read this one particular card, right? Has a non-positional spread in the Marseille tradition, in the French tradition, we look at the overall picture. What is happening? The line of sight is a big thing. Where are the characters looking? What is transforming? Where do we begin? Where do we end? And therefore, we don't have an actual position. It's sometimes called the open reading, which is a reading which is kind of organic. And if you see a blockage, you try to add a card to it to say, how do I resolve the blockage? So this idea of open reading and non-positional spread usually tends to start with three cards, and then you build on top of that to see, where it takes you. But whichever you choose, you have to know and set the convention to what you are doing with your cards. If you don't make it clear to your cards of what you are doing, they're not going to give you a clear answer. If you ask your friend a very unclear question, they're not going to understand it and they're going to give you an unclear answer, or they're going to be like, what the hell are you on about? You know? And this is, you have to treat the cards like if they're your friends. You have to be clear about what you want to ask. And I always get the students, when you start, to write down the question so you can always go back to the question, right? Otherwise, you just end up fluffy in La La Land and, riding unicorns on clouds, what can you say?
Mm.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes absolute sense, and I completely agree with you. Um, yeah, it's interesting because it's like whenever I'm using a non-positional spread, as Adrian calls it, and I like that terminology, I usually just call it free flow. So like
No.
whenever I'm reading free flow, it's like a lot of that to me, like I mean, I'll almost read it sort of like uh Lenormand style, Lenormand, however you pronounce it. Adrian, can you pronounce Lenormand for us?
Le Normand.
Lenormand.
Le Normand.
So
You
Lenormand.
kiss with a E, with a French E, so
Uh,
you can kiss.
uh,
E.
uh.
There you go.
Thanks. Um, but point is that I will lay out the cards, and so much of what I end up laying out is about as Adrian calls it, line of sight. So where the characters and the cards are looking, or like it will become about like what is next to the card, because in traditional Lenormand, that was awful. Please don't judge me. That was terrible. Yeah. But so much of Lenormand is like usually about what is right next to a card,
Mhm.
and that influences the energy of it. And so this is just like another way to read. Also, like if I'm reading free flow, like I'll go more toward color and numerology as well. And then I begin to kind of like look for blockage and movement. So what I mean by blockage and movement is like so much of tarot is all about understanding where the energy is flowing, where the energy gets blocked, why the energy is getting blocked, and then understanding how we're going to get that movement again, if that movement is going to come back. Um, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the thing about non-positional spreads. There's so much you can do with them because then they become very organic, and you kind of have to be aware, and you kind of have to be open to whatever they are trying to tell you on the spot, right?
Mhm.
So it's a bit more, you have to be a bit creative, and you have to sometimes really think outside the box. But absolutely, I mean, when I do mm, I don't want to say most times because this is not true. I'm a big liar because I have my periods. I've got moments where I really, go onto positional spreads, and moments where I really don't. I just use, I go with the free flow, like you say. Um, but it is what is essential is to know what you're doing with your spread. For instance, the Celtic cross, right? Delphine said there's a million versions of the Celtic cross out there, and there are, and a lot of them might seem to be very similar, but they're going to have one or two position that changes. For example, the position at the bottom of the pillar for me, that first bottom position is the advice of I use this as an advice. So this is
That's really interesting.
right? The tarot gives you this advice on how to act, right? And then I go up, the outside influences, and it could be, how people see you, and then hopes and fears, which are two sides of the same coin, and then the outcome. This is my side pillar, right?
Mm.
Same way as,
My
yeah.
my side pillar isn't a side pillar at all. I do a circle. And so I actually don't have the cross on the side. Like, or sorry, I have the cross, but I don't have the pillar on the side because I think the pillar is
Ah.
stupid. I'm like, what is this pillar doing here? Because I'm very circular. And my my position at the bottom, well, actually no, of the cross, actually never mind. Because my position at the bottom of the pillar is actually the personality.
Okay.
So if we are thinking about the cross, or sorry, the pillar, I can't do it this way. So if we are thinking about like the pillar that's on the side, yeah, my bottom card is actually the personality, and then I also have the environment. So that's usually like external energies that are kind of coming into the spread or potentially affecting it. And then I also have hopes and or fears, which I think beautifully described two sides of the same coin, because people often get really confused by that, and I'm like, well, it's so intertwined. Like, how do we not
Yeah.
understand that? And then I have the outcome. But it's interesting as well because, like, the cool thing about the Celtic Cross is it can just give you so much information. And the way that I
Mhm.
like to explain the Celtic Cross is if you can think of it as an extended past, present, future. It's like basically just imagine that you have a past, present, future, and then you're just kind of adding to it to get a couple of different elements that then adds like a little bit more movement and information. And also, with the way that I have designed my spread, I have I mean, I suppose it's really difficult to describe without a diagram, but at the bottom of it, it's like what ends up happening is that you have the subconscious influences, the personality, and then the environment. And so it's almost like you sort of have, you're able to see on the ground what's happening. And then at the top, I have the conscious influence, the hopes and their fears, and the outcome. So we're able to kind of get into the realm of like what's going to happen, or sort of like more, so like just energies that are more abstract. And then it's like in the center, it's like I end up having like, the card in the center, which is like usually represents the querent. And then I have the past, and then I have the future. And so basically that's just kind of like, the sequence that gives us I suppose time, right? And just sort of like tells us what will be happening or is happening. Um, but anyway, I realized that that was quite abstract, especially for people that are listening verbally.
The Pisces in a glory. Uh, no, no, it's interesting because the Celtic cross, which is a very famous spread, you'll have all these different ways of looking at it. For me, I mean, the first three cards, the central one, which is the querent at the moment of asking the question, where they're coming from and where they're going. This is the first line. And you also have the one crossing the querent, which is the obstacle. But for me, the card underneath is the subconscious aspect. What is pushing the querent to act or in this situation without them maybe being aware of it? And the card at the top of the querent is what's in their mind, what they're thinking about, where they want to go. So the way I look at it is that is the subconscious, the unconscious, and the conscious aspect, are they aligned or not? And this is interesting to see because what drives you to do something is going to be shown there, right? And what you think is driving you is going to be shown there as well. And then you can really talk to somebody and say, okay, well, you think you're doing this for that, but actually, what is really driving you might be that. And so it's interesting to realign things. So the Celtic Cross really gives a wealth of information uh,
Yeah.
in this aspect. But we have the French cross, which is much smaller, which is only five cards, and it is a cross that way as well. We have on the left, we have the person at the moment asking the question. The second card is the obstacle. The third card at the top is the advice, and the bottom card is the outcome. And in the center, we put a synthesis, right? So the French cartomancer, French tarot readers all know how to do this tirage en croix, we call it, a French cross.
Sinon, je crois.
Tirage en croix. Here you go. So I think what we're trying to say here is that um, you can use a positional and non-positional spread. But what's really important is to be clear what you are about to do at the beginning of a reading. What is the question? And so first of all, you need to figure out the question. And then out of the question is born the spread, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that you said it perfectly. It's like, you explained that when you're asking a friend a question, you have to be clear, or otherwise your friend can't give you a clear answer. And
Mhm.
I think that, I see my deck as a friend. I know that you do too. And so ultimately, it's like we just need to make sure that we are being very clear with these cards, because if we set clear parameters, they will give us very clear answers, as Adrian has already said. And so basically, I think what we've done, well, I think I won a couple of rants here, but I think we have like done a good job of explaining the fact that basically It's more important that you just understand the way that you're using your cards. And that's what spreads are about. It's like we pick the correct spread for kind of what we're trying to understand. And all spreads, or like spreads or not spreads, right? So whether we're reading organically or whether or not we actually are reading a positional spread, um, you know, they'll give us the answers that we're
They're a
looking
map.
for.
They're like a map. You know, you described yours as the frame and the picture. I like
Yeah.
to think of mine as a map. I mean, I'm saying this because I just saw the Odyssey. And the Odyssey for me is a map of the journey of the soul back home, right? And so the tarot spread, the spread you're going to be using is a map that's going to help you um, sort of drive through the complex question you might have, you know, the complexity of the answers, you know, of the question. And it really feels like a map, and with some points that you need to hit. You know, where are you coming from? What's informing this action? What will happen? What is your emotional aspect? How is your what does the tarot advise you to do? These are all, it's a map on how to
Yeah.
answer the person, you know, and they're very, very useful. And you can create your own spreads, and you must create your own spreads. They have to become a second nature, really part of you. They really have to, you know, like brushing your teeth. You know, somebody's asking you a question, and you know what spread you're going to be using with that question. You know, I
Yeah.
think that's how I feel it. You know,
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you.
cool. Is there anything you'd like to add about this spreads? I know it's a bit of a convoluted episode, but uh, I think,
I don't
well,
know. I don't think that it is convoluted because I think at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, anybody can pick up a book and, you can learn a variety of different spreads, what they
mhm.
do, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like what nobody is going to teach you in any book is just like the creativity behind it. And so sometimes these episodes do get like a bit free flow because I'm a bit free flow. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the relationship that I think that everybody needs to have with their cards in order to get the answers that they're seeking. It's about creativity. It's about right brain.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. You know, anybody can. I mean, I have a book on my shelf which is 365 tarot spreads. There's a different spread for each day. And and I bought it because I wanted to see what was in there. And it's very, you know, the author has this idea that with each day there is a special event, and because of that event a spread is inspired, but sometimes it's just a one card spread or a two card spread, or you know, a very complex one. And you're right, any book can teach you spreads, but the creativity behind it, you have to you have to work with it, you have to develop it. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we teach courses on spreads. I mean, with Treadwells, I have a full course, which is intermediate, which is the spreads, and we learn how to do this. I'm going to be teaching, I think it's going to be in October. From my website, you can find it. I'm going to be teaching a course which is going to be called From Oracle Writings to Open Readings. So I'll take people through the process of understanding how we deal with a non-positional spread, you know.
Yeah.
And so that would be, I think that would be a 4 weeks course, which I'm going to be advertising this week on my website. But also,
Amazing.
Delphine, you know, teaches. I don't. Do you teach spreads within your?
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a 2 week spreads course, but I haven't actually taught it in a while. But if you take my majors and minors course, I always go over Celtic Cross because I think that it's good to do an introduction at a low level, even though nobody really quite understands how to use it if they're new to the tarot. But it's about just like making that introduction and then just like making sure that at least you know it by name, you've put the cards out on the table, and that at least you've taken a stab at trying to interpret it. And then it'll just get more and more fluid from there. I also usually just teach elements and spirits. I kind of just introduce the concept of all of these spreads quite early because at the end of the day, it's like, you don't need 365 spreads, although it makes a nice book. You just need kind of like a couple that you understand really well. And
Yeah.
again, like, I mean, they'll just become these like, I mean, yeah, like a compass or a frame or whatever. or a map, as you said, that, you just kind of hold inside your heart and they will give you the information that you need.
Yeah, and do not be discouraged because spreads can be tricky, and it's not because you don't get it immediately that you're not good. You just have, it's an art. You just have to keep practicing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you only get to learn how to swim by jumping in water. You learn how to read tarot by reading the tarot, you know?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
be okay with it not always being a linear process.
I mean, what is a linear process nowadays? It's like nothing is.
God, time isn't even linear. And I will fight with people about that. But anyway, that's for another episode.
Well, it's subjective, it's subjective. I don't think animals see as time. Kundera writes about this in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, that the
Yeah. Yeah.
dog
Yeah.
is time in a cycle, not in a linear way. And it's yeah, if I think humans see time as linear, but who knows? Who knows? That's another that's another topic. Right, Delphine. I wish you a beautiful week. I'll see you next week for another episode.
Can't
And
wait.
well, see you soon. And
See you
and
soon.
your spreads.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.